expectations have been put onto 2021 because of what occurred in the 2020. Therefore, it will be interesting to see what actually happens. And we're already getting a small dose of what's actually
I was going to say, what do you
happening.
mean? What do you mean interesting to see what's good? 2021 has proven to be a phenomenal extension of 2020 so far. So that's good. But sprinkled with bits of hope. Let's not say that there hasn't been some nuggets of gold that have happened, right?
Yes, you've had the elections in Georgia went well for people of the Democratic persuasion.
If that is your persuasion. But for democracy, it was pretty good. But there's also been so much.
So there's the thing that happened at the Capitol, Alan. Now, granted, we don't have a political analyst that we invite on the show. We should find one.
No, we're just going to have to suffice for now. First of all,
we're good for now.
Cheers to 2021. Before we just jump into what's making it very difficult for me, I didn't have a drink with anyone on New Year's, but that's not to say I had a great New Year's with my parents. I hope you had a good New Year's as well.
I did.
Yeah.
I had several drinks with several people.
All right, that's all I need to say now. Let's go ahead and jump into what has been going on.
So how do you feel, Alan? How do you feel?
It's tough, man. First of all, one of the things, as being someone who, like you and a lot of our friends, have worked internationally and worked around in different parts of specifically Asia, Southeast Asia, or anyone who's worked around the world. If you're American right now, but you've also have many friends around the world who obviously see what's happening to America from the outside perspective, like, it's pretty embarrassing. I think that's
it's embarrassing.
Thing. I was trying to tell my parents that, and they're like, why is it embarrassing? You should be frustrated. I am frustrated, but also I'm really embarrassed because this should not happen to what we thought was a stable democracy, a stable political system.
It's definitely revealing as to how delicate the balance is.
Anyone listening knows what we're talking about. We should just frame it real quick, right? There was an enormous, not enormous actually, it wasn't even that big. It was an insurgence or an insurrection to the Capitol of the United States government while they were trying to count the already certified votes that our country had cast to vote Joseph Biden as the next president of the United States. And yet a bunch of Trump supporters turned a protest into a riot and stormed the Capitol.
No, that's essentially what happened. You had the current sitting president of the country rile them up and then basically tell them to go to the Capitol and cause problems, which they then did do.
More than I'm sure, I don't know what he expected. What did Donald Trump expect to happen from his rhetoric? Or, I mean, people said worse things, right? Rudy Giuliani said trial by combat. He literally said that to the people. Do you think Trump thought this was going to happen? Like, was this his goal, or is he just trying to stir the shit and try to get people on his side? Or get more money.
I don't know. So I mean, he's definitely about riling his base and being this figure that says shit. Like, that's what they want. They want him to say those kinds of things, and he knows that's what they want. Therefore, he does it. I don't know if he thought that's how far it was going to go.
I didn't think it was going to go that far. What did you think? I didn't think it was going to go that far.
No, I mean, I wasn't surprised.
No, I mean, yeah. They called for it.
But I also didn't really think that's the direction that, I mean, I woke up that morning and I saw like an Instagram post and I was like, what? And then I went to CNN and I was like, oh, fuck. And then I started watching all the videos on YouTube. I was like, oh, that's horrible. It could be possible for him to actually think that they could go in there and like
gently persuade
stop something
these
enough to give him, well, just they could stop the counting of the votes to make it official, and give him more time to do something. What that would be, I don't know. There's that's a possibility, and then there's also the possibility that, he just says stupid shit all the time. Didn't really think that through because he never does, and then that's what went down.
if there's one thing we know about what Trump says is that he's almost never culpable for it. Like,
No.
he's never really had to suffer any ramifications for the things that he says, whether it's on Twitter or in person. Like, he says the most outlandish things, and because he says it so often, we just kind of go, "Oh,
It's
well,
just like, oh, that's what he does."
says. But they really believe that this election was fraudulent and stolen.
One of the scariest things about some of the footage that I saw wasn't necessarily the act of these people that were storming the Capitol in itself. Scary enough. But
Very
it
scary.
was the legitimate anger and passion that a good amount of these people had. Like they actually felt that this is the only way for them to save the country that they love, was through an actual revolution of some kind by storming the Capitol. Like they felt in their heart that they had been wronged so much that this was it. This was the only way. That's the scary part. Because that's not.
That is definitely
because storming the Capitol goes away. Storming the Capitol can be stopped and it's done. That feeling, that idea that's within them, that's a cultural thing now. That's a Trumpism cultural phenomenon that is now ingrained into a large enough population within the country.
It's a lot of people,
this shit can happen. Huh?
I said it's a lot of people.
I don't think I realized how many people were kind of falling into this kind of Trumpism to this extent, to where they felt that impassioned and wronged by the rest of the country, to where they would do this kind of stuff until this. And now you're just like, oh no, it's a lot.
There's so many different facets of this situation that make me entirely uncomfortable and frustrated. Like, the part that you're talking about, I think, is also the most scary, is just how passionate and angry they are about this, right? But there are other elements to this as well, just like how many conspiracies have been founded to keep them going, so much so that anything else that tries to disprove to them that what they're hearing is wrong is automatically going to be assumed to be a conspiracy. If anyone tried to convince any one of these people that they're wrong. So, for example, all of the social media companies taking Trump completely off their platforms. To anyone who is against what happened at the Capitol, we say good, and thank God he can no longer incite these people to attack our politicians. But on the other side, they're thinking, well, of course this is what they're doing. It is a global conspiracy to quiet the truth.
They are. This is their dystopian nightmare coming to fruition, right?
You can't do anything to convince them.
So it's weird, right? Because like if they read 1984 by Orwell, they're like, oh my God, they're cutting down
Big Brother's here,
our social media platforms and trying to control our thoughts. And then when somebody that's a Democrat or a liberal reads 1984 George Orwell, they're like, oh my God, Trump is out there brainwashing all these people. He is the Big Brother. So it's like we're two different worlds. And so I was watching before we hopped on, I was watching a little bit of Fox News, and I watched a little bit of CNN News.
Yeah, get a little. Yeah. Okay, you know what? Tell me how different or
It's both of them. They're both fucking so nightmarish.
Well, that's not our
Fox.
Political. That's where our whole country
CNN
is.
Too.
We're so polarized. We're so polarized.
You've got fucking, and I usually like Jake Tapper, but
I like
sake,
Jake Tapper.
I like him. He seems like a cool guy.
Smug,
but this dude. So he's got, I guess it's the head of the National Guard on to talk about their delayed response. Okay. And Jake Tapper's doing the same shit that I fucking see Tucker Carlson do. Just from a Democratic perspective. He's trying to funnel the head of the National Guard down this path of him saying that they were slow to react because of a political conspiracy to stop it. Now, there are, maybe that could happen. I don't know.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about not the political conspiracy.
Bottom line is,
how these fuckers got into the Capitol.
Yeah, we should.
Like, we'll talk about
Bottom line
because
is,
there's a
though,
race thing here too that we need to talk about. But yeah, go
there
ahead.
is.
Continue, because I like where you're going.
Bottom line is the guy that's heading up the National Guard was basically like, hey, you know, was there a lack of preparedness? Yes. Does that mean that there was political motives behind it? He was like, no. The guy was just like, no. He's like, we went through the same normal protocols that we usually do. We tried to act in a manner that we thought would be right. We were told to wait for a certain period of time. We then, you know, they according to him, he was like, we went through our protocols, blah, blah, and Jake Tapper kept being like, what about were you guys politically, blah, 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 being forced to do this? Is there conspiracy, blah, blah, blah? And the guy's like, no. And I was just kind of like, Jake, you said it once. Don't keep, because you're turning into a Fox guy now, just like pushing him down this path.
I've seen it.
He's trying to spin it. And then you go to Fox News. It's just the same crap, but from the other side. And it's just like.
That's where everyone is now, man. But that's what, I think that's what happens when emotions are so high, when tension is so high. When people, because look, everybody in the news organizations is biased in some direction or the other, right? And to present a truly objective view is not really being honest. But when emotions get high and like everyone gets more, I don't know, worked up about everything, their political motives or their own intentions will come through more. I don't blame Tapper for being like that, but he should be more. I don't know if there was necessarily a political conspiracy. But to a certain extent, the lack of preparedness, or sometimes it sounds from reports like just disorganization, like they weren't prepared for this. But the fact that they weren't prepared for this says something about what they thought was going to happen. When all signs pointed to pretty significant chaos, and it was all public, and all of their communication, like they made them, their intentions were well known.
So the FBI knew exactly what was going on. So they had people that they were already investigating before this, that they knew that they were obviously surveillancing, right extremists that they knew were about to go show up there. And these guys were planning to bring weapons and to organize like an actual storming of the Capitol with weapons, with multiple people. And the FBI showed up at their front doors and went, we know what you're doing. We're on to you. If you leave your city and head to the Capitol, you will be arrested immediately. And so everybody that they went to the doors of didn't show up. So can you imagine?
It could have been worse. It could have been so much worse.
It could have been so much worse. So it was only so unorganized because the FBI was on it. And basically was like, hey, no.
I think that's what a lot of people maybe are realizing is how much worse it could have been, because just like the story you were saying, they stopped people at the border with weapons. Like they kept people from coming into Washington, D.C. if they had magazines or clips that exceeded a certain capacity. Like, for example, the leader of the Proud Boys was arrested before he was ever able to get into Washington, D.C.
Right.
So like there were a lot of people who didn't pass that. So, and thank God that there was at least that. But I think my biggest frustration and the alarm bells that were going off in my head as I was witnessing and hearing what was going on was how did they even come close to getting in? And then how is there not an immediate, significant, strong response to get them out? Because they were in there for a while. I think they were hanging out and they were chilling. And then there's obviously stories of police officers taking selfies with the crowd. Like there's a lot of different stories about police officers who were lenient towards their causes, right? And that's a whole nother issue because
they're obviously outmanned. So I think you run into a situation where they were not prepared. They did not have the people there. The what?
Why? My question is why? That's the biggest frustration. If this were a Black Lives Matter movement, and it's been said before, and I know we can both agree, if this were a Black Lives Matter movement, it would have been armed to the teeth.
Yeah. And they did, right? There was a Black Lives Matter protest outside DC, and you had the National Guard actually at one point in front of the Capitol, standing in front of it. Why that didn't happen this time? Good freaking question.
Yeah.
Um,
And they're investigating
as
it, though.
far
We
as
shouldn't say it's not gonna, like, they're looking into it.
yeah, as far as yeah, I think obviously I think that's the answer. Like, why are these people allowed to just storm into the Capitol? I think, well, they didn't prepare and put the National Guard there. That's the answer. And then you had police, Capitol Police, that were just outmanned. So I mean, what do you do? Yes, there's a lot of racial conversation that can be had, but I mean, that aside, you have a very few Capitol Police, and you've got like 10,000 people that stormed the damn Capitol.
I'm not saying that the police on
so your
site could
options
have done
are
any better.
yeah,
I'm not
and I think
taking
so.
anything away from what that.
And I think they probably knew that they weren't really armed, right? So I think it was kind of one of those situations where when it started happening, yeah, what do you do? Because do you start shooting them? Do you start shooting a bunch of people? Is that worth it?
No, you don't. You don't.
Or do you just say, okay, let's make sure the people in Congress are safe, as safe as possible, blah blah blah, and like, okay, let's try and slow them down. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm shocked more people didn't get killed. Like,
yeah, I am too.
shocked.
Well, I mean, we both know there were pipe bombs. There was a van located near the Capitol, just armed with all kinds of weapons inside. Like, it's insane. And they're going to try it again. I don't think that they're going to be underestimated this time. And I do think a certain amount of it was just negligence and underestimating the crowd and where they were going to go with it. Because there have been protests outside of the Capitol many, many times, but they've never actually tried to breach the Capitol, and I think that's another thing that made me really upset, is that they got it so wrong. Protests are a thing, and yet they did it so wrong so that their whole cause was undermined. Because let's be honest, there's been such a backlash towards Trump that it's hard to believe that they feel like their cause was advanced. I don't know. I mean, I actually do know.
The thing is, in their little circles, their networks, as they're talking to each other online, they're just riling each other up more. And again, I'm not sure how many of these people are out there. I mean, it'd be interesting for the FBI to give us a figure on like actual how many Trump extremists that are in these little group chats having these types of conversations are out there. I mean, they know for sure, right? So yeah, it's interesting, right? Just because
terrifying, Justin.
Because they're gonna Well, no, I mean, it's there's a lot. It's scary, but it's also interesting because, like, what are these people going to do? Because they obviously know they're being monitored now. So now they've literally, this is like spy stuff now. They've got to like communicate with like notes and like mail things to each other to plan stuff.
Like, it's all about pigeons these days. Have you heard about the newest influx of just like super highly trained pigeons and carrier pigeons?
No, are they using pigeons?
Well, no, but like there's a new, it's a more advanced technological like training of pigeons, so that there's like some type of beacon sound that they follow. It's crazy. No, I'm just bullshitting you. Don't know.
I believe I do. Pigeons are smart.
I'm kidding. But to be honest, like they've been taken off so many.
You said that as a joke. I guarantee you, in 2 weeks, there's a news story about political extremists using pigeons to communicate, so they're not being surveilled by the FBI.
I'm gonna feel really responsible at that point. And also, if this goes live, it might track me down and be like, "Sir, Alan Wong,
are you using?" So we heard that you were the creator of the pigeon messaging.
Are you on the black pigeon market? You are the founder of Black Pigeon. Okay, I want to change directions only slightly, because there was actually something. First of all, I was very much looking forward to talking to you about this, because we talk about politics all the time, and I know we both get heated up about stuff. But there's an element to this now that's happened after the storming, right? And I think we've covered that, not covered, but I mean we've talked about it. So this whole idea of Trump being banned from Twitter and being taken off Facebook, and Parler losing Amazon hosting services, took off their website hosting capabilities. The Apple Store, Google Play, right, no longer offers Parler, which is, if anyone who's listening doesn't know, is an app. Tell me if I'm wrong. It's a chatting or
It's
like
basically like a
community
conservative
that's
Twitter.
very Republican and
I
conservative.
think it's like a conservative Twitter.
Okay. And there's another one called
Conservative
Gabs.
Republican Twitter.
But the
Yeah.
thing is, so not only has stuff like that Parler gone down, but also Trump's been banned from a lot of these social media sites.
Mhm.
Actually, most of them. And obviously the response on the conservative end is that, well, there goes the entire concept of free speech or freedom of speech, right?
Right.
And so now this is like a real debate. And I know that the ACLU has come out with statements a little bit kind of towing the line on both sides, saying this is overdue that Trump is being more censored on social media, but also being concerned about the idea that these private corporations are taking it upon themselves to censor people's speech. Now, I have my own opinions, and I won't say it yet because I'm actually super curious about what you think about it.
Yeah.
But that's been in my mind right now. It's because it's fresh. Twitter banned our president.
Yeah, I am conflicted.
As I thought you would be.
It's really complicated. I mean, I'll say this right now. I'm so happy that man is off Twitter.
I know, right?
Like, my knee-jerk reaction when I saw that he was off Twitter was, why only until now? I think, but my knee-jerk reaction when I saw that they just shut down Parler, my knee-jerk reaction was, oh fuck, wait a second, that's kind of nuts. But then, as I read a little bit more on it, I started to realize there was so much violent rhetoric, conservative extremist rhetoric that was apparently happening on Parler, where they're actually planning to do violent things. Apparently there was enough of that where they were like, we got to squash this. So, I mean, I don't know how much of that was going on there, but if there's enough of that on an app to where a high enough percentage of that happening on an outlet, we're just like, this is about to cause some problems. I mean, what do? Somebody's gotta take the initiative and be like, sorry guys, we can't allow you guys to communicate in this way. Like, because that's got to be in breach of the contract to use that social media platform. With regards to banning a president off social media, and obviously you can make the comparison. You know, people say lies all the time, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's freedom of speech. I think political world leaders have to be held to a higher standard with regards to lying on social media apps, because of the amount of followers they have, especially leaders that make policy. And like if it's just obvious they're just straight up lying over and over and over again, they have to be held to a higher standard. And I think, now I'm not saying that it should be Twitter necessarily that makes that call, or Facebook that makes that call. God knows there's a lot of calls that Facebook makes that they shouldn't be making. But there needs to be some sort of body that's in charge of these types of things. I think probably that power needs to be taken away from the actual social media platforms, and another government body needs to be set up, whether that's a federal government body that's created by the federal government of the U.S., or maybe there needs to be an international body that's maybe created by the United Nations or something. That way you can get more of a broad kind of view on things, because obviously the things that Trump tweets don't just affect the U.S., they affect the world, they affect different economies, they affect one thing that I was thinking of the entire time as I'm watching what kind of transpired at the Capitol was, hey, going to other countries and telling them that they're doing democracy wrong is kind of the U.S.'s thing. That's our soft power, right? Like, instead of going, that's how we like negotiate with countries to essentially get what we want as a nation. Is be like, hey,
figured out.
We got this figured out. Listen to us. We'll give you guys some aid. Let's do this democracy thing, and let's make some trade deals. Or hey, we want to put a military base here. Or hey, align with us and not Russia and China because we're your boys. And that whole thing at the Capitol, we're going to need some good salesmen now to be going over there as our diplomats to make these deals happen, because we lost some street cred.
That's what's and that's what it is essentially. Is
and I think that does go back around to why you need this body that maybe does is in charge of like what political leaders can say.
Okay,
I don't
so
know. But then
I
at the
have so
same
many
time, it's like,
things.
then who's in
Oh,
charge of that body?
I know that
And like,
that's
then
the
does that
problem. And I
become the
have so
Big Brother
many.
situation? It's
I
freaking
have
social
so
media is
many
just horrible
responses.
in
Okay,
general.
so you said a lot of stuff there, and here's the thing about having
And
an
now I'm
international.
thinking about what I just said, and I'm not even sure I agree with it now after
No,
I've
no, I
said it.
know, but it's worth talking about. It's worth mentioning, right?
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it actually sounds very legitimate to have a governing body that could, but here's the problem: is it censoring or is it just trying to monitor or whatever? I think first of all, having an international body that covers all of global social media would be terrible, because I think if there's anything, it needs to be local and like specified or specific to the
Yeah.
local region at least a little bit. But what I found the most interesting about what you said is that you went actually, I think, a step further from what Twitter was actually saying.
Mm.
Because you said that you felt that political leaders had a responsibility to be truth, or had to be held to a higher standard when it came to being honest on social media, or at least not creating falsehoods or terrible lies, right? And that, I'm not saying I disagree with you, because I do think that all of political leaders should be held to the highest standard of honesty and truth and sincerity. But that's also maybe a slightly different thing from the idea of inciting violence and calling, which is actually a real thing, which I never thought that we would have to talk about, which is the president calling for violence against his own government, or just, and so I think that Twitter started tagging Trump's tweets for the same reason you were talking about, which was like, he needs to be held to a higher standard. He can't just outright blatantly lie and create complete falsehoods about an election. And they were flagging him for that. But then they cut it out completely. They suspended him completely when it came to bringing violence upon the Capitol. And I think
because it became dangerous.
So these are also private corporations. I think that was one of the things that I was thinking about a lot too, is that this is not like a freedom of speech that's not being inhibited by the government, right? A freedom of speech that is free from governmental control. These aren't governments. And you mentioned it also, you sign a contract when you join any of these social media companies, right? And a lot of it is they own your content, or a lot of it is that they have the ability to tell you can't say this or that. And so now we're into this weird realm where is freedom of speech like a value that we need to hold dear when it comes to our personal relationship with a private corporation? Like, do they have responsibility to protect our freedom of speech if we sign away whatever we choose to sign away to?
They
it's
do.
Weird,
right? I mean, because social media has become a form of speech, right? The most powerful outlet of speech at this point.
Which
it's
crazy, because we wouldn't have been here even 10 years ago, not even close. But also, we should point out that freedom of speech is looked at differently across the entire world.
Yep.
Right. And so we're approaching this from a very American standpoint, which I think we should point out is one actual extreme on the spectrum of what freedom of speech. Americans take freedom of speech very seriously. And it's not that way in a lot of other places.
No, especially, I mean, a lot of countries in Asia do not have the same freedoms with regards to their speech as the U.S. does.
But you pay a price for freedom of speech. I think that's what we're learning, right?
Chaos can be sown,
Hopefully
which is why it's so important to have an educated populace that elects leaders and that is willing to hold those leaders accountable when they screw up.
Which is the only way democracy was meant to be able to work, right? And one of the things I keep hearing from like either news pundits or reading articles is the concept that democracy is fragile. It's, especially with such a large nation and such a huge population, it's tough. It is delicate. The idea that we should all be able to have different opinions and then discuss it out so that we come to a mutual understanding is a pretty lofty goal. It's been working kind of, at least in most of my lifetime until now.
I mean, it's still working,
Sure. We're not at a,
there's always going to be some bumps in the road there. Do you think he should be impeached?
Oh, that's a whole nother bag of chips. do you even think that he can be impeached with the short amount of time left that he has in office?
He could realistically be impeached with like a day left of his presidency.
I would love, and I'm very biased, I would love to see him impeached. Do I think that would further the gap and even more greatly polarize the nation? I don't know. I think the nation might be so polarized that the effect
Yeah,
of
I'm not
impeachment
sure
might
that's going
have
to
that
make a
has no
difference.
no bearing whatsoever on the
Yeah,
chasm
I heard
between us.
Yeah, I was listening to Lindsey Graham make the argument against the impeachment, saying that that would divide the country more. And I'm kind of like, first of all, fuck you, Lindsey Graham.
Yeah, in
Like
all ways.
you don't get to be concerned about dividing the country after the shit that you've been pulling for the past several years. I think internationally, it is useful to hold him accountable in some way. Whether that mean he's forced to resign, or that mean they implement the 25th Amendment, or whether he's impeached. Because I mean, again, like other countries are looking at this, and you're gonna have other countries be like, he was your boy for 4 years, then he did this, and you guys did nothing. Like other countries could make the argument, you created military coups in our countries in the past for that same shit. Like, so it's like, and you're not even going to hold him accountable in any way.
I think he has to be held responsible after he's out of office, no matter what. And I think that's going to be necessary. And I don't know what that's going to look like, whether it's, being prosecuted in any court that might be interested, which might be most of them.
Several courts will be
being
interested.
impeached, being prevented from ever running for office again, which I think is a big point. There's conversation about even if he hasn't been impeached, they can still vote so that he can never run for office again. Because, oh god damn it, he's already talking about maybe running again, and that is
It's terrifying.
the swift kick to the nutsack. That's what that is. That's painful. So something like that. I think something has to be done. We're just gonna have to see what can be done. I mean, Jesus, they didn't vote to impeach him the first time, or they didn't vote to remove him from office in the Senate the first time. So why do we think that they're going to do that again? How much,
well, because now there's a lot of people that are aligning against him to save their political careers out of their own self-interest.
A lot of self-interested people. Do you think people like, was it Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz should be removed from the Senate, or should be forced to resign?
Josh Hawley, I think, should be.
Pretty bad. Why not Ted Cruz then and Josh Hawley?
If you're gonna take out Ted Cruz, there's a lot of other people that need to be taken down too. So then it becomes a bit of a witch hunt scenario. Now, so Ted Cruz had that one rally in Georgia where he said a couple of things that were inflammatory, but that wasn't at the actual rally in DC. He did not help. Again, it was obviously he hindered things more than helped them. I dislike Ted Cruz even more now than I did before, obviously.
Which is saying a lot.
I don't know if what he did right now, with everything that's going on, I'm not sure if it helps to force him to resign. Because then you've got to go after a bunch of other people as well. I think Josh Hawley, fuck that guy.
Fair enough.
He just seems like such a douche.
Can I be honest? I'm a little scared of Josh Hawley. I feel as though he's trying to put himself, him and Ted Cruz and anyone else trying to follow Trump, putting themselves right in position to try to take over Trump's base, try to garner that support or that anger, that energy, right? And you know what? He seems a lot slicker and smarter than Donald Trump. And anyone who is as evil as Donald Trump and smarter is infinitely more dangerous.
Yeah. Josh Hawley's scary.
But
he's definitely
scary. What? I think we know he's already shown himself to be who he is. Hopefully you pointed out there are a lot of Republicans now who are coming out and finally admitting that we need to move on as a country.
I mean, better late than never, but also
way fucking late.
So irritating. So it's just because now they know that politically for them to survive, they have to part ways. It's like, really? 2 weeks left, guys.
Thanks a lot. You really did us a lot of
Appreciate
good
it.
at this point.
America thanks you.
Make America great again, but on the other side.
Andrew Schultz's take on it was pretty good. Did you watch that clip I sent you?
I didn't watch it. In fact, you know what? I should watch it right now.
No, it's too long.
Oh, is it long? All right, I'll have to give me a.
He said that was a weak coup. That was a pussy ass coup. He's like, why are we getting upset about this coup? He's like, they go in and he goes, they go in and they're taking selfies with cops. That's not a coup. It's like they're live streaming. I was kind of like, he actually made a really good point. He goes, people don't care about buildings anymore. Things take place on Zoom. He goes, the coup should have been on Zoom. On the internet. Take over Zoom. That's your coup. Not a building. I think that was interesting because that is where coups will happen, right? It'll happen through hacking and taking over of intelligence and information, not necessarily a building.
If you want to be more disruptive, yeah. Because let's be honest, what they were trying, and that's a whole nother point, what they were trying to interrupt was really just a ceremonial
it was ceremonial.
activity.
Like
it was really just
actually
kind of
stopping
like,
anything.
Yeah, there was nothing to be decided on that day because all things had been decided. It was just kind of a process, right? And the American government has a lot of different processes that they do to certify and validate things. But so no matter what, they were never going to have like a full say unless Pence was going to go along with them, right? Unless there was some, and then he came out saying he wasn't going to, and then they wanted to hang him, which was
there are people there that were ready to kill Pence.
There's some really, and there was also a range of people there, right? We had people who
you had some people that kind of just
that they even got into the Capitol.
They were just like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. Whoa. I think they just kind of got swept in with it, right?
Right.
And we're probably just sitting there really confused. Because there's that video of them going into like that one part, the whole of what is it, where they have all the statues and all the paintings.
Statues.
And they have the red ropes. So these people storm into the Capitol, like breaking windows, and they get to that one rope and they'll like stay in between the red ropes, and they're like, oh, it's safe. Don't go outside. Don't go past the velvet red ropes.
I thought that was also crazy too. Like I thought that was insane that they were filing down slowly through the red.
Whoa, John, back over here. Wrong side of the velvet ropes. You're taking this too far.
Look, you know what velvet ropes mean, okay? I don't care who you stand for, or who you voted for.
Yeah,
that's a velvet rope, good sir. Don't you dare.
Haven't you been outside of a club?
They'll get mad at you. They'll get mad at you for doing this. They'll get really mad at you for going across that red velvet rope. Don't you know? You know what? It's gonna be okay eventually, I think.
Do you think Trump has a presence now? Do you think his brand, to an extent, is amplified post-presidency, or does he wither away into the abyss of history?
Do you mean where it is now because of this, or do you mean where I see it going, or where we think it's going to go?
Yeah, where do you see it going? Him as a political.
I don't think he's going anywhere.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be around. I think it's going to be around for a while. I think that he's going to be illegitimate in more circles now than ever before, right? I think it's going to be like far less acceptable to be vocal about being a Trump supporter, and I think it's going to be like just far more taboo and frowned upon, right? So it's going to become a smaller percentage of the American population, maybe, that's at least vocally supportive of him. But I also think that small group that is still for him is going to become even more vehement and enraged and energetic in what they're going to do.
There's a lot of healing that needs to be done.
I don't know how that's going to happen, man. How do you?
I don't know how it's going to happen either.
How do you come to terms?
I mean, I think the left needs to be held accountable to an extent, with a great deal of polarization. The rhetoric of the left and the Democrats needs to be more inclusive of the country as a whole, of the people that are not in the urban areas. They need to not. I think those people feel looked down upon by the left a great deal. I mean, Hillary Clinton saying basket of deplorables. That wasn't
Okay.
good. That was
Okay.
a problem.
But
That started it.
look at what happened. Is that not deplorable?
Okay, so
That
but I
is
mean,
a
okay,
basket of
so when she
deplorables.
said
Those are
that,
the people she was talking about. That is
yeah,
exactly who
but
she was talking about.
when she said it though, it was as if she said, "If you're a Trump voter, you're a deplorable person,"
At this
right? So
point,
that's
I have a real hard time not feeling the same, even though I know
you
it's not
can't
true.
equate people
I
that
know
voted
it's
for
not
Trump
true,
4 years
but it's
ago to what's happening now because they
that's true.
didn't
Okay,
vote for
okay.
him after this.
That's fair.
This is a
That's
different
fair.
thing,
But what about
right?
people who just now voted for him just before this? Do you hold people more responsible who just now voted for him in this recent election than people who voted for him 4 years ago?
I question why they would do that more so. But at the same time, I don't think it was really clear to a lot of these people until now to how dangerous he was. And you've got people that aren't necessarily voting for him. You have people that were voting basically against the Democratic Party. You got people that were voting against the left. I think the left has become more and more left over the past decade. You have people voting against that. You have people voting
It's not that the left has become more
for
left.
voting.
America has become more left.
You have people voting against the taxation that would occur. You've got a lot of people that were voting against certain things, but had to vote for Trump to do that. Just like you had a lot of Democrats that weren't necessarily voting for Biden, they were voting against Trump. You had a lot of people that voted for Trump, but weren't really voting for Trump. They're voting against the Democratic Party ideals.
Which,
And I don't think you can sit there and call those people deplorable people because they voted for Trump in that regard. You can't do that. They've got, people are voting for their bank accounts. They're voting for what they think serves their best interests for them and their family. Many of those people that voted for him do not like Trump. They think he's a freaking nightmare. But this is their options.
I think no, but it's not. I think that voting for Trump, even though you don't like him, I get so upset when I read interviews about Trump supporters who say things like, and this is like a pretty literal quote that I read. Granted, I read it. Who knows if it's true? I shouldn't believe everything I read. But it was an idea of, no, I don't like him. I don't approve of the things he says, and I wouldn't invite him into my dining room to have dinner. But I'm going to vote for him. And how can you believe that that kind of person is okay to put in office just because your own personal interests are more important than the damage that he does to the greater good, right? And that's how I look at it personally. Is that people
we've had this
took their own
conversation
personal,
before.
they take their own personal wants to be more important than what is for the
not
greater
necessarily.
good.
You're also voting for a different structure of taxation, which you believe will help the economy as a whole.
Cutting taxes for the rich and come on, man. That's not a tax plan. That's just literally reducing
it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think certain very smart people have a different view of how the economy works, right? There's economists that have more of a right-wing view on what it takes to get the economy going. So you can't hate on some of these people that voted for him for those reasons. This is a different view of how to structure your economy. That's all it is.
And they're willing
there's also a lot of there's a lot of social reasons. I think the left is
racism. The biggest social reason is racism.
I mean,
any party that
I do not think the vast majority of people that voted for Trump, I don't think are racist.
Oh, okay. Well, then you and I are not.
I don't think they're
completely not in the same line of opinion.
You think most people that voted for Trump are racist?
I think greater than 50%.
You think over a quarter of the country in the U.S. is racist?
I think
really
the willingness. I think the
not
willingness,
not like ignorant racist. I mean hatefully racist.
Ignorant racist is racist. Violently racist.
It is, but I mean, it's also
no, you can't. The majority of Trump supporters are not violently racist. Okay, I would even say that the majority of Trump supporters don't think that they're racist or know that they're racist, right? So I get that. But I do think that there's a certain amount of implicit racism to be able to vote for a party that you know is more aligned with white supremacy than the other side.
Yeah, right?
I mean, just the willingness to align yourself in that direction, just even if you don't agree with them, but your own self-interest and personal interests are more important than the fact that those people hate color, people of color. That in itself is it's a privilege to be able to vote for that party and vote for your own personal financial concerns, because you're not being subjugated, you know, and oppressed. So there's an element to it of naive and ignorant racism that maybe
Yes.
is not fair to hold those people to the same level of responsibility for their votes. And I think that I would agree with that.
Okay.
But I know that we're on slightly opposite sides of this part, and I think that that's
Yeah.
part of where America is right now. And I think that's
Yeah.
actually really important that people have these conversations and can respect the other point of view.
I mean, I'm not sympathizing with Trump in any way. I
I know
do
you're not.
sympathize for a
I'm not
great
trying to
deal of the
place you on
people that
that side.
voted
I'm
for
so
him.
sorry, Justin, my buddy. I'm not trying to place you. I'm not trying to make you speak for the Trump supporters of the nation.
Why am I having to speak for the conservatives when I'm a liberal?
Because you are more level-headed and less emotional about this, and want to and try to have a bit more of an understanding view. And I want to be very biased about it.
I think moving ahead, the Democratic, whoever's in charge of like the Democratic Party's marketing strategy, like, I don't know if that is an actual person, but if it is, that person needs to be fired. And they need to hire somebody that I don't know is good. I think, and some of these things may feel like, in the grand scheme of things, and especially with everything that's going on, some of these points may feel, not as important. But I think they do matter with regards to the branding of the Democratic Party and why you had so many people that stayed on the Republican side. What I think the Republicans got way more of a Hispanic vote than they had in like forever. Like, okay, why is that? Why is a president that had such toxic rhetoric towards Latin Americans getting the Latin American vote? So, I think Democrats forget, like Democrats need to remind themselves, most Latin Americans have very conservative views. They're quite religious. They're really big into the family. It's not surprising that a lot of Latin Americans went and voted Republican, in spite of the things Trump said.
There's a huge amount of the Latin American population on the East Coast that escaped from communism, you know? And so being able to say, as you have said, and you believe that the Democratic Party has become more left, and I think that is true. I think personally America itself has become more left. And that's one of the reasons that the Democratic Party has. But it has become left, and it being labeled as communist is terrifying to a large part of the population in America.
What do you think about Bernie Sanders using the term democratic socialism?
I don't think it's going to help his cause.
No, it was stupid. It was stupid.
I don't think it's going to help him.
Why did somebody not go up to him and be like, no, Bernie? Like, that was bad. See, branding, that was bad.
Well, the Democrat Party doesn't have cohesive party lines in the same way that the Republican Party has, right?
They're much more unorganized.
The Republican Party falls in line to what the singular message is, because they know that the best way for them to get most of their goals across is by all aligning themselves in the same direction. And the Democratic Party doesn't do that. I actually think it's a good thing that they don't do that, because the goal is to
Not if you're trying to beat the Republicans.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of okay, you know what?
I mean, if we didn't have a two-party system, sure. If we had a ranked voting, sure. Which I think there should be a ranked voting system. That way, you get rid of the two-party system altogether. And I think with a ranked voting, you can even make an argument that with that, there's no need for the Electoral College. And ranked voting, for people listening that aren't privy to what that is, it's basically you vote for multiple presidents. So you can vote for like your fave five, right?
In order.
And everybody gets so that way, you're not just having to go to your base, because you want to end up high up on other people's scale. You want to be some people's second and third vote as well. So that means you're trying to appeal to the entirety of the country when you're running. So instead of just like these little spots in like Iowa and Pennsylvania and North Carolina, right? Which is, you're getting a more honest politician with a ranked voting system, I feel. And so, yeah, I think that solves a lot of your problems right there.
Maybe. I know what you speak of, but I don't know if it would work, and I haven't read enough to know if it does. Anything that brings a larger diversity of political thought to the conversation,
Yeah.
I think is important. And I think that is exactly what a ranked voting would do. Like, I think, and that's the biggest problem, is that we're so polarized. There's two options, and bipartisan politics, we've shown, is really dangerous, and it can get more and more polar and extreme as you go along. And it doesn't take much to light the fire, as we have seen.
I'm going mildly off topic here, but this relates back to things that conservatives are finding quite annoying about the left. It relates to that a little bit because I've heard.
Interesting that you want to go that direction. Okay, let's go.
I heard John Leguizamo talk about this, and then I heard some other.
Is John Leguizamo conservative?
No, he's very left.
That's what I thought.
And,
I wouldn't have.
And then I heard, and I love John Leguizamo. I think he's brilliant. And then I've heard some other Latin American pundits and comedians go the opposite way from him. So I remember, was it Bill Maher talking to John Leguizamo, and Bill Maher was straight up I think it was Bill Maher. We'll say it's Bill Maher for now. He was straight up was like, "What's with the Latin X thing? Like, why can't it just be Latinos?" And John Leguizamo was like, because Latinos is masculine, and we want to be inclusive of our Latin American sisters, so now it's Latinx. And Bill Maher is sitting here going, "But why can't? But isn't Latinos? Isn't that like in that language? Isn't that inclusive of that?" And then John was "Bill, you need to be hip, man. This is what's going on. We're all doing Latinx." And I was kind of like, because to be honest, I hadn't even heard of Latinx till I got to LA in January. And I'm literally filling out things, and they're like, "Can you play a role?" And then I see Latinx, I'm like, I don't know if I can play Latinx because I don't know what the hell this is. And I met this management company, and I'm like, I literally was like, what's Latinx? And they looked at me like I was a freaking alien.
And I felt at that point.
And I felt stupid. I was like, they're like, it just means Latin American. I mean, like, why doesn't it just say Latin American? And they're like, because we use Latinx now. And I'm like, oh. So, and the argument I'm trying to make is you've got a lot of Latin Americans that think the Latinx thing is freaking stupid. They see it as a thing that was created by woke, leftist white people to kind of push more of their left ideals upon them. And I've heard some Latin American pundits being like, we hate this type of shit. This is why you're losing votes. This type of shit is why you're losing Latin American votes. This is why you're losing right votes. Because where does this I don't know, it sounds small, just this name. But at the same time, I think it matters a little bit. I think when you mount up these kinds of things here, and there, I think it does make things a little more divisive. And like, again, most Latin Americans socially are very conservative. So I think something like that does irritate a lot of them that are not in the Hollywood industry. I think, or the entertainment industry. I think they sit like in Brownsville, Texas. Like, so I grew up on the border, right? So I partially grew up on the border, but my family lives on the border of Mexico. They don't use Latinx. It's not a thing. I've only heard it in Los Angeles. So I think it irritates people just enough. Your thoughts?
A lot, once again, it's a lot. Cannot speak to the validity or the importance of the Latinx terminology. I myself, while having been mistaken for being one of the Latinxes, am not. And but I have been familiar with the term, and I think I knew about the term maybe before you did, maybe not.
Okay. Because it just came out of nowhere.
I'm not surprised that a large portion of the Latin American community would just not subscribe to that. Because Latina is also a term, just like Latino is a term. And Latino stands for both male and female as a greater group. Yeah. Now, one could say, and I'm not saying that I subscribe to this, but one could say that inherently within the language, the fact that Latinos would be the assumption of both a mixed male and female group in itself is misogynistic. But I'm not saying that myself. And that's not the
I
point.
mean,
No, that's not the point. I'm not going there.
maybe.
Maybe not. And this, like,
But even if it is,
even if it
like,
is, that's not for
like, I
woke
mean,
liberal Americans to decide to change, right? Did it sway the Latin American vote? I don't know, but for
well,
sure,
no,
I
I'm not
think that
saying that one
no, for
thing
sure,
swayed the Latin American
But
vote.
I think what you're speaking to is important and true, which is a certain amount of assumption on the
Mhm,
liberal and Democratic Party, an
mhm.
assumption that the color of one's skin will dictate their vote.
Yeah, not
So an
correct.
assumption that African Americans, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, there's also a huge portion of conservative Asian Americans out there too, and
Yeah.
so
Oh, for sure.
the
Because of the money. Because of
you
the money
can't
thing.
deny that if you're wealthy in America, your best economic interest is with the Republican Party. Like, and
Yeah.
that is a point. And in some ways, it's more of an economic divide, not more, but in a lot of ways, it's a huge economic divide along with a racial divide, and I think they go hand in hand. But there is a certain amount of arrogance within the Democratic Party, at least in Democratic Party leadership, in
For
assuming
sure.
that what they in their political sphere has decided is the values of the party and what that's really going to attract. And they assume that people who are not white are naturally going to be Democratic anyway. And I think that you speak to a big surprising factor in this presidential election. Trump expanded his percentage of the Latin American vote, and in some places his percentage of the African American vote in some counties.
Yeah.
And he definitely increased his total number of African American and Latin American vote, right?
Yeah.
That's not nothing, right? That came from
No,
somewhere.
that's important. It's an important thing to think about. And ask, okay, why is that happening? And I think it's for reasons much to do with that. I think it's the branding of the Democratic Party.
And that's why Trump took liberals by such a surprise, both in 2016 as well as the support he's been able to continue having.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't think that there were such large portions of America that were going to support him, and they did. And we're still handling it and having to come to terms with it right now. How we come together, man, I have no idea. I don't even. We're definitely not going to figure it out in this podcast. That's for sure.
No, that's not what this podcast is for. We need to have a political analyst that we invite on.
I wish we knew people as smart or as cool
I
as
feel
that.
so. My brother-in-law knows a lot about all this
Does
stuff.
he?
We could maybe bring him on. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Southern California has been, like, if not the hardest hit, one of the hardest hit by the coronavirus as of late. Correct?
At this moment, absolutely.
Is the worst,
Yeah.
right? Okay. It's also had some of the most strict guidelines to follow, right? For businesses to follow, and closures and lockdown stuff as well. Correct? Is that also safe to say?
It has. Not necessarily. Okay, but continue with your line, and then I'll have my opinion on
and
it.
again, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I think there's an argument here that many people are having. Let's go ahead and go down that path. With that being said, you've got places that are staying open-ish that with certain guidelines and regulations, like places in Texas for sure, like Houston and Austin, and they're not having anywhere close to the issue Southern California is having. So what do you attribute that to? A, and then B, at this point, should the government be like, hey, we thought this was going to work. It's not. Things are just as bad as they were before, and it's worse than other places that are have opened up, to help re-stimulate the economy and save some of the businesses that have not already been crushed. Let's follow similar guidelines that some of these other cities have done so, and start the opening up process to at least get the economy going again. And we got the vaccines coming out. What we're doing isn't working anyway. What do you think about that?
Whew. Tonight, Justin, you keep hitting me with the heavy ones. Not holding any punches tonight.
No.
I think I know where I stand on it, I think, but I also know this is an incredibly divisive topic right now. in California.
But,
It doesn't run.
and I think this is a
political
topic that
lines.
seems
It
to,
doesn't.
this topic transcends political divides at this point.
Yes, it
Like
does.
this isn't even a liberal conservative thing anymore.
It's not. It's and I can't perfectly articulate what defines the different opinions on this or different sides, but I do know that, for example, me and my roommate are on different ends of this this debate, and we talk about it. A couple of things from my point of view, and I can only list that as my point of view because I've already been forced to admit to many of my friends that I don't know necessarily how right I am about it, and I'm probably wrong about some of this stuff. For example, I'm not a small restaurant owner, and if I were a small restaurant owner, I'd probably have a completely different opinion.
Guess who used to be?
This guy. Oh, hey, I'm sorry, man.
We had to shut down because of the pandemic.
Hugs, brother. Oh no. Hugs, brother. Casa, I never got to eat there.
It was so good.
I know, I've heard. I mean,
anyway,
I don't know, I've heard.
Go on.
A couple of things just about what you mentioned in California having some of the strictest guidelines, and it did. It's strictest, but like that period of when it had the stricter guidelines than the rest of the country was predominantly at the early end of the pandemic. Within the first, and it also came to California very early on, right after New York, before the rest of the country too. And regulations were very strict early on, and they worked. For the most part at the early on stage when the virus hadn't taken as deep roots into society at work, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was still, cases were still on the, it was still bad. They were still really bad though.
But we did see a correlation between the dip of cases and the initial point when everybody took it on board or took it upon themselves to follow the restrictions. And I think that's the biggest point, is that it's about following the restrictions, because Californians very quickly stopped following the regulations and restrictions, and they were never enforced. So they were more like travel advisories. Like they were more like suggestions rather than anything that was ever going to be enforced.
I mean, but the effects to the businesses were very real.
Terrible. Like it crushed businesses all across the country. But because California's regulations were so strict, and yet they weren't necessarily being followed, so the effects of them weren't being seen, but enough restaurants stayed closed and it really, really hurt them. They tried to amp up restrictions again and it didn't work. Partially because
like right now.
They're trying to do it again. But it's kind of like trying to put toothpaste back in a bottle. You've already let it out, and people have seen what it's like to be forced to follow regulations and restrictions, but not being given the financial support by the government to be able to follow those restrictions. And so there's this huge debate, and I think that's where I've heard the biggest debate amongst my friends in California, in Los Angeles, is the idea that regulations are being required or asked for, but there isn't support given. And how can you ask us to close shop, and how can you ask us to leave all of the income that we could make and starve, basically, if you're not giving us anything in return? And that's one of the biggest differences between a lot of countries. A lot of first world countries in America is that a lot of first world countries have been able to take care of their citizens and offer greater financial support. But after that first period, of when the pandemic hit in America, it all kind of froze up, and no more money was given out, and it's tough.
So what do you think? Open up, roll the dice?
No.
You think stay closed
down? So despite all of that, like tiptoeing, my personal opinion is that we still need to keep it as locked down as possible so that we can limit as many deaths as possible. And that's tough. I'm like, I have a phone call from my brother. I guess he didn't know that we were podcasting.
Didn't know. How do people not know? Well, we don't do it live.
He didn't get the memo. But
I say at this point, open up.
So okay.
I mean, to the extent, like, kind of just do something similar to what Austin and Houston are doing.
Texas
outdoor
also
dining's
has
fine.
A lot of deaths too. It's New
yeah,
York,
but
Texas,
I mean,
California,
their hospital system has been able to cope with it. So I think one of the main issues with regards to the rise in cases and hospitalizations is that the hospitals are not able to handle the amount of people coming in. So now it's not just people that are suffering from COVID that have become a problem. It's just people that are suffering from any kind of emergency and then go in. And now these people can't be treated. So here's something that I think has been a massive freaking fuck up on the part of not just Southern California, but many cities that have been wanting to figure out how to do this. We knew for ages the second wave was going to happen. They've been talking about it since frickin' May. Why was there not infrastructure built over the last several months to accommodate the uptick in hospitalizations? You can build these things quickly. You can build infrastructure, buildings outside of these hospitals, or you can build makeshift hospitals to where you can start to handle more people. You can create a structure where, okay, people with COVID, we have all you people go here. If you're about your COVID, all you other people with normal issues go to this hospital. There's enough hospitals in Los Angeles and the southern part of the U.S. U.S. is very fortunate that it has a decent enough medical care system where there's a lot of hospitals. There's hospitals fucking everywhere.
It's because we got
right?
space.
So
we got land.
We got space. So the infrastructure could have been made. So think about it, all this money that's been going towards other things right now that could have been used to build these little temporary hospitalization centers.
Well, I don't know what
man.
money
You had time.
Okay,
and this didn't even come up. It wasn't even freaking mentioned. Everybody's like, the second wave's coming, and I don't even remember anybody talking about this. It's like, fuck.
It's hard to tell if the responsibility lies on state government or federal government. Probably both.
True.
Definitely both. There hasn't been enough funding, and you know what? I am polarized in my Democratic views, and I'm biased, and I believe that the Republican Senate has blocked a lot of the funding that states needed to be able to secure this. But at the same time, you're right. At the same time, you're right. Everybody knew the second wave was coming, and I think that complacency set in everywhere.
Failed leadership, Alan.
Oh, well, that without a doubt. But you know what? That has been the
at the federal and state level.
It's been the thing for a long time right now, right? Drives me crazy when people like Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, says everyone stay in and lock down, and then is seen going out to private dinner parties with like no mask on and stuff. And it's like
he's dropped the ball.
It's messed up, you know, like failed leadership asking extreme things from their people and then not following and setting an example themselves, and it's tough.
What do you think about this mass exodus of known Californians that are just leaving? Joe Rogan, Elon Musk, what's that Jewish political pundit guy. Anyway, he left for Nashville. A lot of my friends are looking for jobs in like Arkansas and stuff. like we're out. Like we're done. We can't do this anymore. What do you think?
I'm never leaving California.
Is California really shooting themselves in the foot here though with all this?
What do you mean? Like, I don't think California is doing a worse job than the rest of the country. At least not significantly so.
Tell that to this thunderstorm. It got really angry when you said that.
I think they have an extreme hard situation. I think every state with a high population of people is having a hard situation. And any state with like enormous cities that have a huge percentage of the nation's population living in them, anywhere where there's high density population is going to be harder to take care of because you can't socially distance as well. And I think that is one difference between Los Angeles and well, big cities in Texas are also highly dense.
Houston, Dallas.
So, no. I held back. I held myself before going there because I do recognize that big cities in Texas aren't that different. So I don't know, man. Like, it's so fucked up all over the country. I'm not going to leave California to another place in the nation where I believe it's going to be better. I don't want to have crazy weather in other states. It's really nice here still.
Crazy weather.
You know, I don't want.
Weather in Austin's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's hot.
It's hot in the summer. It's hot in the
You
summer.
can get a little hot. A little hot. But I lived in Singapore. I lived in Singapore. I can't get that better.
Oh, it gets way hotter than here.
But less humid at those times. Oh no, it gets pretty humid.
No, just as humid.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, see,
It snowed there. It snowed there yesterday in Austin,
which alone is crazy.
A lot of snow. Yeah, cool. Good talk.
I think we have covered.
Yeah, we're good.
An array of things, a myriad of things that has been both helpful for my psyche as well as my emotions in general. To let some. This is a messed up time, but there's good things. I think I'm not sure. Maybe
it is messed up. I have to do fucking branded live streams for a living right now.
Hey, I know you can do it. You have branded live stream in your blood. Can I just say it? You were born to do this. Maybe she's made with it. Maybe it's Maybelline.
I think I have to say that next week.
If you do a Maybelline branded live stream, I won't be able to handle myself. That would be, you'd be so good at it. Look with your fresh locks right now.
Look at this hair.
You think
this hair just happens? You think this happens, Alan? No. Maybe. Or maybe it's Maybelline.
You never know. I hope to never find out, Justin. But hey.
Are we podcasting yet?
I never know, man, but I always enjoy talking with you. This has been crazy. And to everybody who possibly tuned into this point, thanks for listening. And we'll see you again on another episode of Are We Podcasting Yet? And we're going to have happier things to talk about, right, Justin?
Maybe.
I hope so.
Maybe it's Maybelline.